If someone wants to ask you what makes a superhero, I'm sure there's a lot of obvious comments that would be given, like origin, superpowers, personality. Those are all true in their own way, but recently I've had a different opinion. I think the villains are what make the hero. Without the villains, there are no heroes. There is no need for a hero. These days, superheroes outside of DC and Marvel are definitely different. There are definitely more different shows that exist, like Invincible, The Boys, and they all have one common theme. Evil superheroes going wrong, usually based off injustice. But is that a good thing? If they're all superheroes are going bad in shows like these now, then where are the villains? The idea of the superhero going wrong, the idea that superheroes are questionable, is what drives those shows. I think there's a question that has been erased from the general mind of people. I think people have forgotten something. That another question that should be asked, which in some ways is even more important. What if supervillains existed? What would that do to the world? People, I think, don't need villains in shows like these. And sure, the superheroes going wrong, I guess, are villains, but for me personally, it's split down the middle. There are two types of villains when it comes to that. There's the hero who becomes the villain, different, and then there's the classic villain, which I love villains. They're awesome for DC and Marvel. DC and Marvel have a lot of good villains. But I think people these days, at least, are more interested in superheroes becoming the bad guys instead of the villains being the villains. But my point is that we don't have enough people asking the question, what if supervillains existed? I think there should be a show about that. It's a standalone show. No superheroes, there can be heroes, just not super. I want villains and police and nothing else. Now, in some ways, supervillains are scarier than superheroes gone wrong, because just as a Superman injustice standpoint, Superman thinks he's doing the right thing, so he has a little restraint. We all know he really doesn't have restraint in those games and comics, but he has morality, more or less. He has the need to do the right thing, at the very least, despite the bad measures he takes. But with supervillains, they don't need to please anybody. They are okay of being just villains. And maybe not Doctor Doom or Lex Luthor, but they're villains. They're okay with it. They'll do whatever it takes to win. They don't need to smile for the cameras. They're the villains. That's their job. Now, if a hypothetical show like this existed, what would it be about? I think we could get interesting with this, because if supervillains actually existed and not superheroes, would it really be that different from the world now? Sure, supervillains would be incredibly dangerous, but in reality, they're just criminals with superpowers. And what do authorities do when they're faced with a criminal that's unique, stronger, more dangerous? I can tell you that. They form a unit. In this case, I'm looking to DC, like the Major Crimes Unit, the Special Crimes Unit. So in the Dark Knight movie, they had the MCU, Major Crimes Unit, which Commissioner Gordon ran. So, is that how it would be if supervillains existed? Would they just have, like, a supervillains crimes unit? Specific officers who could actually handle supervillains? So that is the case. That actually might make a show like that more interesting and focus a lot on the idea of supervillains being real, but yet in a very more interesting way. Now, I know what you're thinking. cops can't fight supervillains. That's why superheroes are here. But if you've watched those Transform movies, the 5 ones made by, I don't know who made them, like Transformers, Rise of the Fallen, and all that, those movies, they had Nest, which was essentially the government strike team that the government used against Decepticons. And they were good at their job. They actually could handle Decepticons and other Transformers very well. So, my point is, if that's possible, if people can go up against literal Decepticons, I think that means they can handle supervillains. Now, let's dive specifically into what supervillains existed, if they existed, besides this, like, major crimes unit. If supervillains existed, what would they do to the world? I think it might be interesting, like, there could be, like, a few different types of supervillains in the criminal underworld. There's the ones who will be hired by higher criminals who aren't supervillains. So, they're basically just hitmen, only they have the power to wipe out Manhattan in less than an hour. But then there's the other type of supervillain. The villain who doesn't just want to get a quick payday. One that has ambitions. Like, would supervillains literally be taking over the criminal elements? Like, would the old-fashioned ways of the underworld just be destroyed with a snap of the fingers? If that's the case, would, like, the old underworld, like the underworld that's made of the organized criminal element, and the underworld comprised of supervillains fight one another? So we should write this down. In fact, I might, I will, I don't know. Let's figure that out later. Another thing I think I guess I just kind of had a thing about, how are there supervillains in the world? They've just always existed. Chemical accident. Nuclear fallout. Anything. All the above. But coming up with the idea of supervillains or people getting superpowers is hard. And I actually need to get some time to think about this. Thanks for watching today's video, guys. It might seem like this is just pointless a little bit, but I can assure you there's a lot to this video that might come later. Might, I guess, being the key word. I'm coming up with something that could involve this. I'm brainstorming some ideas right now, and I might come up with some drawings for some supervillains. I might. This is all early development. I just want to address the fact that supervillains in shows these days that feature what superheroes were real or what superheroes went bad have been left behind. In any case, please like and subscribe for the next video. I can assure you it'll be fun. So, see you next time.